מזמור לדוד, אדוני אלוהי לא יחסר, בנותש ירביצני, על מי מנוחות ינהלני, נפשי ישובב, ינחני במעגלי צדק, למען שמו. גם כי אלך בגיא צל מוות, לא יירא רע, כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני, תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי. דשנת בשם מראשי, כוסי רוויה. אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים.
Cantor Schiffman began by reciting Psalm 23 in the Hebrew. Now you can join with me in the English. The Lord is my shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guides me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. We gather this afternoon to bid our farewell, to remember with love Howard Brower, a loving son, brother, husband, father, grandfather, great-grandfather, uncle, and friend. Today is bittersweet, difficult to say goodbye, but we're also grateful for having him for all these years and really celebrate all that he has done to build this family. Our Bible teaches, L'kol zaman ve'et, l'kol chevetz tachat hashamayim. There's a season set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for planting and a time for reaping, a time for keeping and a time for discarding, a time for loving and a time for hating, a time for embracing, a time for refraining, a time for laughing and a time for weeping, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for speaking, a time for silence, a time for seeking, and a time for losing. Today we can say that Howie has departed from this world at the age of 86 with a good name, and he is at peace. Howard leaves behind many in mourning, his life partner, his best friend, his loving wife of more than 61 years, Hugh Beverly, his 3 children and their spouses, in-laws, really in love, Elise and Carl, Mark and Grace, Karen and Jonathan. The apples of his eye, his grandchildren, Kimberly and Nick, Michelle, Matthew and Ann, Ashley and Dan, Jacob and Brandon, and the diamond in his crown, his great-granddaughter, Edie Rose. Howard now joins his parents, Ida and Arthur, and sister Phyllis in their eternal home in heaven. I'd like to now call upon son Mark to share a tribute to his father.
For those that knew my father, you knew he was a man of few words. For those that know me, you know I take after my father. In his memory, I would just like to say a few words, a couple stories, and of course they include some type of motor and wheels. In 1968, there were new homes being built in Lyndhurst, nice sidewalk neighborhood, with Sunview Elementary School a couple blocks away. Financially, it was probably a stretch for him at the time. Being in sales, your income can vary year to year, but he knew that new homes meant young families with lots of kids on the street. In fact, I think every house on Chickadee Lane had a young family with kids, and we knew them all. About the time I was 12 years old, me and a friend down the street set out to build a go-kart. I had a garbage-picked lawnmower engine that I got running, and he knew a kid with a go-kart frame for sale. We bought the frame, found some wheels, installed the motor, and had a go-kart. We were so anxious to take our first ride, we overlooked two important details: brakes and throttle control. So there we were riding up the sidewalk towards my house with a stuck wide open throttle and no brakes. We both panicked, bailed out just before we got to my house, and lying in the grass, I saw my father run down the driveway to the sidewalk just in time to grab the front of the go-kart, flip it over, saving an imminent crash with the neighbor's car parked driveway next door. My father was many things in his life, but on that day he was a superhero, go-kart slayer. He never said a word about this, figured I'd already learned my lesson, and it probably was something he would have done when he was my age anyways. Not sure if my mom ever knew about this. Then there was a time I came home with the motorcycle, a 1971 Honda CB 500T. Every Jewish mother's dream, right? Living at home at the time, going to Cleveland State, and after weeks of taking the long walk from the parking lot to the classroom, then seeing motorcycles parked right near the entrance to the building, I decided I needed to get a motorcycle. So without telling anyone, I just went and bought one. When I rolled up the driveway, my mother and father both came out seeing my new purchase. My father stood silent as the yelling began, which finally ended with an ultimatum, my mother saying, "Either the motorcycle goes or you go." My father didn't say a word. When my mother finally exhausted herself from yelling and went back into the house, my father, without saying a word, began rearranging the garage so I would have a place to park it. Oh, and by the way, he did sneak in a few rides up and down the street. I'm still wondering how he convinced Mom to let me keep the bike, and I still lived at home. I learned a lot about my family in the last few weeks as his health declined. Even though the sadness at times is overwhelming, at the same time, I have a feeling of gratitude. I'm thankful for Grace, who has always been more of a daughter-in-law, or a daughter than a daughter-in-law to my parents, always enjoying spending time with them, and thankful for my children, Matthew and Ashley, and the grandchildren for having a special relationship with Grandpa Howie. I know it has not been easy for my sister Elise, who lives out of town, but put her life on hold recently and came in for 5 weeks to be with our parents. And my sister Karen, who recently retired, not realizing that she really wasn't retiring, just changing jobs to become a full-time caregiver. I'm really blown away by what both of you have done for our parents in the last few months. Then there's Edie Rose, great-grandchild, who even in the last days of my father's life put a smile on his face every time he saw her. And Mom, I quite never understood why Dad loved Florida so much. Was it the beaches? No. Was it golfing? He didn't golf. Was it flea markets? He hated the flea markets. Family? No, the family was up north. In reflecting back on this, I finally figured it out. He loved Florida because you love Florida, and he loved you. And Dad, you showed me not so much with his words, but with his actions, how to live each day.
What a beautiful tribute. The rabbis say the words that come from the heart enter our hearts. You truly brought Howie here to this moment and taught us so much. Soft-spoken and very kind, Howie was a family man. Beverly would say it's the quiet ones you have to look out for, and that was Howie. He always had a good one-liner. He was car crazy, and as you already heard, that passion was passed down to the next generation. A hard worker who always provided for his family. He was handsome and tall, patient and reliable, a good listener who was loyal and smart. He never argued, never complained. He just loved making all of you happy. He was giving, selfless. Born and raised here in Cleveland, he graduated from Heights High and then continued to study at Kent State for 3 years until he was drafted and served our country for 1 year during the war. But his service was cut short when his father Arthur turned ill, and Howie returned home to run the family business, Brower Shoes. He then ran down the business until it was sold. When Howie was younger and growing up, he worked weekends and summers at the shoe store. He pumped gas and did grease and oils at Gulf Station, and even spun records at dances, part of the group called the Seven Themes, which were 7 guys that hauled all their equipment, turntables, speakers, amplifiers, and records to all the dances. Howie had 3 loves in his life: Beverly, the family, and cars. I'm not sure which one would be first. He spent more than 61 wonderful years with you, his bride, his life partner, Beverly. The story goes that you met when a bunch of couples got together. You each came with someone else. Not really dating, just sort of pairing up. And Howie that night asked you if you were serious with the guy that you came with. And Beverly said no, it's just a date. And Howie prodded a little bit further. Would you go out with me? And you said yes. And as we say, the rest is history. You told me you were smitten by him. Married not soon later on December 11, 1955 at Temple Emmanuel, with Rabbi Green and Cantor Bushman officiating. You lived at Cedar and Belvoir in that 2-family home that your parents had. And Beverly's dad ran a trucking company. Howie started working for him, driving trucks for Grandpa Max. He always said it was the best job that he had. He loved working for his father-in-law, and of course it involved motors, engines, and wheels. Together, Beverly and Howie had a wonderful and happy marriage, building this beautiful family. Anything Beverly wanted, he said yes. You told me I never had to fight with him. Whatever I wanted, I got. You traveled together on cruises, would go and visit the kids in New Jersey for Thanksgiving and 1 week each summer. Of course, you'd go down to your places in Florida, first on the East Coast at Inverary and Lauderdale, and then to your West Coast home in Naples. You traveled to Mexico and Hawaii, many places, but Howie especially loved the trips that he could drive to get there. Howie joined CBB, Cleveland Ball Bearings, with Herbie Harris selling rubber seals and gaskets, Parker O-rings. He loved his work, most especially taking care of his customers, building those incredibly close relationships, and though he wasn't an engineer, working with them on their designs, finding just the right product to help with their projects. He never took advantage of any of his customers. His sales philosophy was that everyone should benefit from it. He'd take Mark down to the warehouse when he was little, on Saturdays and in the summer, and you would manually count all of the O-rings that they had in stock. It took a long time. And son-in-law Jonathan now works on many of the same accounts that his father-in-law did for more than 35 years until his retirement. As Jonathan told me, quote, I'm fortunate to not only have Howard as a father-in-law, but also to have a working relationship with him, as I was brought into the seal business when he retired. He taught me the business both from a technical aspect, but also from a relationship perspective, to always take care of the customer. And you're amazed that you're still selling parts that Howard designed more than 50 years ago. You would always discuss the business together, not really about the seals, but about the people, how they were all doing, and he was excited at your work accomplishments. And at the business, everyone still knew him as Grandpa Howie. Howard was a wonderful father, family-oriented, sharing his love of cars with Elise, Mark, and Karen. The ritual weekend car wash was passed down to each of you. I'm told that when he would work on his cars for hours in the driveway, the neighbors would joke, am I next, or where should I park my car? His work ethic was passed down to the kids. They benefited from learning from him. He also provided for each of you, giving you anything you wanted. He built a pool in the backyard of that house on Chickadee, so that you could enjoy home and bring all your friends over and have the family together. He never swam in that pool, but he kept it clean. An incredible grandfather, he always showed genuine excitement when he saw you. His eyes would light up, and if you were talking to him on the phone, you could tell the excitement in his voice. He was so proud of you, all the grandchildren. You could do no wrong in his eyes. When you spoke and you asked about him, he'd say, "Nothing new here. Tell me about you." And you'd share what was new and happening, and he was so interested. He was an active grandfather, going to your games, events, and celebrations. As Matt started his own business, Grandpa Howie often offered you advice in sales and business. And Grandpa Howie was able to celebrate so many things, the weddings, welcoming a great-granddaughter. He was there waiting 9 hours to meet Edie Rose. And he loved her so much, getting down on his hands and knees, even just last week at Manure Park, getting down on the floor playing with Edie Rose. He was a dog lover, and dogs loved him. They'd always curl up with him, rest on his lap. There was one rule, though, the grandchildren had. It was never touch Grandpa Howie's hair. Cars, the other love of his life. Howie loved his cars. Not sure if you knew, especially Corvettes. He actually kept the papers from every single car he owned from the last 50 years. There were lots of them, because he was a salesman and he'd get a new car every single year. He kept his car in meticulous shape, never had to put a car up for sale. Everyone wanted his car as soon as he was done with it. He had some favorites. His first car, the 1936 Ford with the rumble seat, the 1973 Corvette, the 78 Vet, that 1986 red Mercedes sports car. Even with his cool cars, Howie was still unassuming, never showing them off. If you showed him a picture and asked him what year that was from, he could tell you based on the car he had at the time. If he stood on the corner of an intersection and you covered his eyes, he could tell you what kind of car was passing by just by the sound of the tailpipe and the motor. He'd take Mom and the kids to car shows. Mark, most especially, he collected model cars. Brandon remembers when Grandpa's health was already starting to decline, going to the Soul and Auto Show. Grandpa spending hours not missing one single car, falling in love with that 1930s hot rod, how his eyes lit up with each classic car he saw. The family all shared that if Howard had one regret in life, it was each of the cars that he sold. Howie always remained strong, thanks to the love and support of his dedicated family, going above and beyond. You've all been by his side, doing everything for Grandpa, making him laugh, telling old and new stories, simply holding his hand and telling him how much you loved him. The family is also extremely grateful to Menorah Park and their staff for the incredible care that they gave to Howard in these final weeks. You should all surely know how much Howard loved you. I'm certain that you know how much you loved him. Today we can surely say that he's no longer suffering. Howard is at peace. May his memory always bring us blessings, inspire us, and guide us. Yehi zichrono baruch. May his name be blessed, and we say, Amen. We'll rise now for the memorial prayer as Cantor Schiffman leads us.
El male rachamim, shochein bameromim, hametzei menucha nechona, tachat kanfei ashachiyinam, b'mahalot kadoshim etorim, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת הרשל לייזר בן ארתר שהלך לעולמו בגן עדן תהי מנוחתו. אנא בעל הרחמים הסתירהו בצדק נפך לעולמים וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו, אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר אמן.
Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure, to the soul of Howard Brower, Herschel Laser, who has gone to his eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May he merit the reward of living a righteous life. May he rest in peace. And we say, Amen. Please be seated. Following our service, interment will be at Mount Olive Cemetery. And following the burial, family will receive friends at the home of Grace and Mark, 29275 South Woodland in Pepper Pike, today until 8 p.m. We'll also be sitting Shiva on Sunday from 2 to 4 and 7 to 9 p.m. Friends who wish can donate in Howard's memory to the Menorah Park Hospice.